Welcome back to the deep dive. So today we're getting into something really fundamental, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. We're talking about that really direct link between what goes on in our heads,
Hmm.
our thoughts, and our actual physical bodies.
Yeah, how our inner world literally shapes our brain, our body, and especially how stress fits into all of this. I know you listening want the key insights without wading through jargon, so that's our aim.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we're drawing from some fascinating materials, specifically excerpts from Joe Dispenza's Evolve Your Brain. It's great because it focuses on, well, the tangible biology of it all.
Right, not just abstract ideas, but how our minds physically sculpt us.
hmm How thinking literally changes our biology.
Okay, so our mission here is pretty clear then. Let's really unpack how our thoughts and feelings directly impact our physical health, and especially how we experience stress. Ready to jump in?
Let's do it. And a good place to start is probably right up front, literally.
Okay, you mean the front of the brain.
Yeah, the frontal lobe, right behind your forehead. Think of it as the brain's command center, the newest part, evolutionarily speaking.
The command center. So that's the me part, the part that's self-aware.
That's a great way to put it. It's the seat of your self-awareness, your conscious control. It's what lets you think about the future, make deliberate choices, control your impulses.
The CEO of the brain, maybe. Planning, deciding. I bet a lot of people listening want to feel more in control, so this is key.
It really is. The frontal lobe is our tool for consciously shaping our brain and how we react. It's designed to be adaptable.
Adaptable. That leads us to neuroplasticity, doesn't it? The idea that the brain can actually change.
Exactly, neuroplasticity.
Yeah.
It's the brain's incredible capacity to reorganize itself, functionally and structurally.
So it's not fixed like concrete. It can actually rewire.
Precisely. Throughout life, based on new experiences, learning new things, even just changing our focus, it forms new connections, new pathways.
Wow. So that means we can change habits or beliefs. Our brain can physically support that change.
That's the core idea. The brain is built to learn, to absorb novelty, and also to form routines. But if we stop learning, stop adapting,
It gets stuck in its ways.
sort of, yeah. It keeps running the old programs.
Yeah.
What's fascinating is that our free will, our conscious choice to learn or change, seems to be the driver for this internal evolution.
Our free will can reshape our brain. That's huge. So how do thoughts and feelings fit into this reshaping process?
Well, they're central. There's this constant loop, you see. You have a thought.
Okay.
That thought triggers specific chemicals in the brain. Those chemicals create a feeling in your body.
Right, like a worried thought makes you feel anxious physically.
Exactly. Then your brain senses that physical feeling, that anxiety. And what does it do? It generates more thoughts that match the feeling, more worry.
So it spirals. Thought creates feeling, feeling creates more thought.
It's a continuous cycle. And when you repeat that cycle over and over,
Yeah.
say with insecurity,
You think insecure thoughts, you feel insecure, which makes you think more insecure thoughts.
mhm, you end up creating what Dispenza calls a state of being. Your body and mind become conditioned to that state. Insecurity becomes your default setting, almost.
And these states, especially negative ones, can actually harm us physically. You mentioned an example, Tom.
Yeah, Tom's story illustrates how these ingrained, unconscious attitudes were quite negative, essentially became, well, toxic. His body was reacting negatively.
So his thoughts were making him sick.
In essence, yes. His healing really started when he began to consciously observe his automatic thoughts, those negative loops,
Just noticing them.
noticing them, and crucially, realizing they weren't necessarily true. Just because you think it doesn't make it reality.
That's a powerful realization. Stepping back and seeing the thought instead of just being the thought. That sounds like the first step to not being overwhelmed.
It absolutely is. It breaks the automatic cycle, and this ties directly into stress.
Okay, stress. We all know it. What's happening under the hood, scientifically?
Well, evolutionarily, the stress response, fight or flight, is pure survival. Your body perceives a threat.
Like a saber-toothed tiger back in the day.
Exactly. Or maybe just a looming deadline today. Your sympathetic nervous system kicks in instantly.
And what does that feel like? What happens physically?
Oh, a whole lot happens fast. Heart rate goes up, blood pressure climbs, blood gets shunted away from digestion towards your muscles.
Ready to run or fight.
Right. You get a dump of sugars for quick energy, your senses sharpen, pupils dilate. It's all about immediate physical reaction to danger.
Super useful if there's a real present danger. But we humans are different, aren't we? We can stress about things that aren't happening right now.
That is the critical difference. Animals mostly react to immediate threats. But thanks to our big neocortex, especially that frontal lobe we talked about,
We can think about the future or the
right,
past.
bingo, we can anticipate problems, worry about what might happen, or replay past stressful events in our minds. And here's the key. Thinking about the stressor activates the exact same physiological fight or flight response.
So just thinking about my presentation next week can make my heart pound like I'm actually facing a threat right now.
Precisely. Your body doesn't really distinguish between a real physical threat and a mentally perceived one. A cat isn't stressing about its vet appointment next Thursday.
Haha, probably not. So this ability to think abstractly, it's a double-edged sword. It helps us plan, but it also lets us live in chronic stress.
That's the danger. When the stress response is constantly activated, even at a low level,
Yeah.
the body stays in emergency mode. Resources are diverted away from long-term maintenance, repair, regeneration.
So it wears us down over time.
It really does. And it's not just major worries, even feeling out of control, like being stuck in traffic when you're late.
Yeah, that can feel incredibly stressful.
Because it is stressful, your perception of lacking control triggers the same response. It's our internal interpretation as much as the external event.
Okay, so let's get down to the nitty-gritty. What's happening chemically during all this? Emotions, stress. You mentioned chemicals earlier.
Right, so communication in the body relies heavily on molecules called ligands. Things like peptides are a key example. They're like chemical messengers. And our cells have receptors, like docking stations or locks, for these specific messengers.
Lock and key.
Exactly. When a peptide locks onto its receptor on a cell, it gives the cell instructions. Peptides produced in the brain, often triggered by thoughts or emotions, travel through the bloodstream.
And they tell other parts of the body what to do, trigger hormones.
Precisely. They can signal glands to release hormones,
Right.
leading to all sorts of physical responses, feelings of arousal, anxiety, calm. They all have a chemical basis orchestrated by these signals.
Okay, that makes sense. But what was that about becoming addicted to emotions?
Ah, yes. This is fascinating. The body can actually get used to the specific blend of chemicals associated with a recurring emotional state.
Used to it, like
Yeah.
it starts to expect it.
In a way, yes. If you're constantly angry, for example, your cells develop more receptors for those anger-related peptides. The body then almost craves that chemical state because it feels normal.
So you subconsciously seek out situations or thoughts that will give you that familiar hit of anger chemicals, even if it's destructive.
It can happen that way, yes.
Yeah.
It reinforces the thought-feeling loop biochemically. The pituitary gland even gets involved, mixing up a hormonal cocktail that matches the emotion, further cementing the cycle.
Wow. So managing our thoughts and attitudes isn't just mind over matter. It's actually influencing our health right down to the cellular level, how our proteins work.
That's exactly what the science suggests.
Yeah.
Your thoughts have tangible, physical, chemical consequences, which brings us to conditions like anxiety and PTSD.
Right. How do these intense long-term states develop from thought patterns?
Well, with anxiety, if you're constantly rehearsing worry in your mind, thinking anxious thoughts over and over,
You're basically practicing being anxious.
you're firing those anxiety circuits again and again, making them stronger, more easily triggered. It lowers the threshold for the full-blown stress response, potentially leading to anxiety attacks.
Okay. And PTSD, that seems linked to a specific event.
Yes, PTSD usually follows a significant trauma. During the traumatic event, there's a massive surge of stress hormones.
The fight or flight chemicals.
Right. And those hormones actually enhance memory consolidation, particularly in brain areas linked to memory and emotion, like the hippocampus and amygdala.
So the trauma gets burned into memory more intensely.
Extremely vividly, yes. And later, when something triggers the memory of that trauma, even just thinking about it, the brain can release the same stress chemicals, causing the same intense fear and physical reactions as the original event.
So the memory itself keeps re-traumatizing the person, chemically and emotionally.
In effect, yes. It vividly demonstrates how powerful thoughts and memories are in recreating physiological states.
It's clear our minds have this incredible power, for good and bad. But Dispenza talks about using this power intentionally, right? Through mental rehearsal.
Yes, exactly. Mental rehearsal is about consciously using your mind to practice a desired state or action.
Like practicing a presentation in your head.
That's one application. But it's also about vividly imagining yourself being different. Feeling calm instead of anxious, acting confident instead of hesitant, feeling compassionate.
So you run the simulation first. You feel the feelings, think the thoughts of the person you want to be.
Precisely. You're intentionally firing and wiring new neural networks. by doing this repeatedly, consistently.
You build stronger pathways for that new way of being, create a new mind.
That's the goal. You're essentially training your brain and body for a different future. But it's not always easy. Change often meets resistance,
Resistance. From where?
often from the body itself. It's used to the old chemical states, the familiar feelings. When you try to feel, say, gratitude instead of resentment, the body might initially feel uncomfortable, unfamiliar.
So it tries to pull you back to the old, familiar
I
misery.
can feel that way. There's often that internal voice, too, the voice of habit saying,
Yeah.
this is too hard, or let's go back to how things were.
That inner critic or just inertia. So how do we push through that? How do we really take charge?
And we circle back to the frontal lobe,
The CEO.
the CEO. It's our center for willful, conscious attention and action. It's the part that can observe the old program running, filter out the noise from other reactive brain centers, and deliberately focus on the new intention.
So engaging the frontal lobe is how we override the automatic pilot.
It's absolutely crucial. Without its focused involvement, our thoughts tend to just drift along old pathways. Survival, reaction, anticipating based on past memories. We need to consciously direct the frontal lobe.
And that helps with impulse control too, right? Like not snapping when stressed.
Exactly. Impulse control is a key frontal lobe function. By strengthening it, we get better at managing those immediate knee-jerk stress reactions.
It sounds like the frontal lobe lets us step back, detach from that automatic synaptic self, as Dispenza calls it.
Yes, that network of ingrained habits and reactions. Engaging the frontal lobe allows us to disconnect from those associations and quite literally become the new thought we are consciously choosing to think.
And that's how the rewiring happens, by becoming the thought.
That's the mechanism. You make the thought more real than anything else through focused attention.
This has been incredibly insightful. So wrapping this deep dive up, the big takeaway seems crystal clear. Our thoughts aren't just fleeting things. They have direct, powerful physical effects on our brain and body.
Especially regarding stress. How we think about stress directly shapes how we experience it physically.
But the empowering part is that we're not just victims of our thoughts. That frontal lobe gives us the capacity for conscious change.
Absolutely. It's the tool we have to break free from those ingrained, often negative patterns and their physical toll. We can choose to actively cultivate different thoughts and feelings.
It really leaves you with something profound to consider, doesn't it? If your thoughts are constantly creating your reality, your physical state, what thoughts are you going to choose from now on?
What kind of new self could you start mentally rehearsing? It's a powerful question for you, the listener, to explore.
Definitely food for thought. Take some time to reflect on your own patterns, your own internal landscape. Becoming aware is always the first step towards conscious control.